I was 22, living alone for the first time in a small apartment in Ohio. It was a Tuesday night, quiet and uneventful, the kind of night you usually just scroll through your phone and fall asleep. My apartment was small, just a living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom, but it was mine and I liked the independence. That evening, I had finished a long shift at the coffee shop, came home, ate a quick dinner, and settled into the couch with some TV. Everything felt completely normal. The streets outside were empty, the neighborhood silent except for the occasional car passing by. My apartment smelled faintly of the vanilla candle I'd lit earlier. Nothing about the night seemed off. I remember thinking how calm and ordinary it was, too calm, maybe. I had just finished the last episode of a show I'd been binging and stretched on the couch before heading to my bedroom. As I walked down the small hallway, something made me pause. At first, I thought it was just the wind hitting the window, or maybe a loose floorboard. But then I noticed it, a tiny scratch on the edge of my apartment door. It was almost invisible in the dim hallway light, but it wasn't there earlier. My stomach sank slightly. I don't know why, but my mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the cat from the apartment above had scratched it through the mail slot, or maybe it was just old paint chipping. I shrugged it off, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched that was slowly creeping over me. I locked the door as usual and turned off the living room lights. I had a routine: always lock the door, always double-check the deadbolt. Tonight, for some reason, I paused at the lock, stared at it longer than usual. My gut told me something wasn't right, though I couldn't explain why. The hallway was quiet, almost too quiet. Then I heard it, a faint creak from the other side of the door. At first, I thought it was just the building settling. But then came a soft tap, almost like fingernails against the wood. I froze. My hand tightened around the doorknob, heart starting to race. The sound didn't repeat immediately, just a pause, a waiting silence. I couldn't see anyone, of course, and there was no one I knew that would be coming by this late. My mind started racing through possibilities: intruder, prankster, maybe someone who had a key, but nothing made sense. That tiny tap was the first real hint that my normal, quiet night was about to change. It was subtle, almost insignificant, but it was enough. Something or someone was outside my door. And whatever it wasn't supposed to be there. I remember standing there for what felt like minutes, listening. Nothing moved. The silence returned, but now it was heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that my apartment wasn't entirely mine anymore. That normal Tuesday night, which had started so calmly, suddenly felt tense in a way I had never experienced before. And I didn't yet know just how real the danger was, or how close it already was to me. At the time, my life was simple and routine. I had moved to Ohio for community college and rented a small second-floor apartment near campus. It wasn't fancy, but it was affordable and close to everything I needed. The building was old, with narrow hallways and thin walls, but it felt safe enough. Most of the tenants were students or older couples who kept to themselves. I didn't really know my neighbors, but I recognized their cars in the parking lot. That night was in late fall. The weather had started to turn cold, and the sun went down early. By the time I got home from work, it was already dark. I worked evening shifts at a local coffee shop, usually getting off around 10 p.m. After work, I followed the same routine almost every night. I reheated leftovers, watched TV, and scrolled through my phone until I felt tired. Nothing exciting, nothing stressful. I lived alone, which was something I had been excited about at first.
No roommates. No noise.
No one touching my stuff. My parents lived about 2 hours away, and we talked on the phone once or twice a week. That night, my mom had called earlier just to check in. She asked if I was locking my doors and being careful, like she always did. I laughed it off and told her everything was fine. At the time, I truly believed that. Inside the apartment, everything was familiar. The living room couch faced the TV, the kitchen light buzzed softly when it was on, and the hallway carpet was worn down from years of foot traffic. The front door was old, with chipped paint and a metal deadbolt that stuck if you didn't turn it just right. I had learned to push the door with my shoulder while locking it to make sure it caught properly. There was nothing unusual about that night. No strange phone calls. No suspicious people in the parking lot. When I came home, I passed the same cars I always did. A pickup truck on the left, a small sedan near the stairs. The hallway lights were on, casting that dull yellow glow that made everything look slightly faded. I remember feeling tired more than anything else. It had been a long shift and my feet hurt. I wasn't thinking about danger or fear. I was thinking about sleep, about setting my alarm, about whether I had clean clothes for the next day. The only other person involved that night was my friend Jason. He had texted me earlier asking if I wanted to hang out, but I told him I was exhausted and staying in. He lived across town and had no reason to come by. As far as I knew, no one was planning to visit me. That's what made the night feel so ordinary. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I always did. There was no reason to be on edge. No reason to suspect that anyone else would be paying attention to my apartment at all. At least, that's what I thought at the time. I didn't notice anything wrong right away. After turning off the TV, I stood in the living room for a moment, stretching and listening to the usual sounds of the building. Pipes clicking. A distant door closing somewhere below. Things I had heard 100 times before. I grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen and walked back toward the hallway, already half asleep. That's when I realized how quiet it had become. The heater had stopped running, and the building seemed to settle into an unnatural stillness. I told myself it was nothing. Late nights were always quieter. Still, I slowed down without meaning to, paying more attention to every small sound around me. As I passed the front door, I thought I heard something from the other side. Not a knock. Not a voice. Just a faint shift, like someone adjusting their weight. I stopped and listened. Nothing followed. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I needed to, my hand hovering near the light switch. I turned the hallway light off and headed into my bedroom. As soon as I lay down, I heard a soft noise again. This time it sounded closer. A light scraping, barely audible, coming from the direction of the front door. My first thought was that someone in the building was walking past. The hallway floors were old and creaky. I waited for footsteps to follow. They didn't. I sat up in bed and checked my phone. It was just after 3 a.m. I hadn't meant to stay up that late, but time had slipped by. The screen's glow felt too bright in the dark room. I turned the brightness down and listened again. The apartment was silent. I told myself I was being paranoid. Living alone had made me more sensitive to noises. I lay back down, pulling the blanket up to my chest. That's when I heard the sound again, this time unmistakable. A slow, careful turn of the doorknob. My breath caught. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The sound stopped, like whoever was there realized I might be listening. My heart started pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe someone had the wrong apartment. Maybe a drunk neighbor. A few seconds passed. Then another sound. A soft tap against the door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Almost hesitant. I felt a cold wave of unease spread through my chest. No one knocks like that by accident. I slid out of bed and moved closer to my bedroom door, careful not to make noise. I stood there listening. I could hear faint breathing now. Slow and controlled. Too close. My mind ran through possibilities, but none of them made me feel better. I thought about calling out, asking who it was, but something stopped me. A strong instinct told me to stay silent. To let whoever it was think I wasn't there. That was the moment I knew something wasn't right.
Not in a dramatic way.
Not with panic. Just a quiet, steady realization settling in my gut. Someone was outside my door. And they weren't supposed to be. I stayed still listening. The breathing on the other side of the door didn't stop. It wasn't heavy or rushed. It was slow, controlled, like whoever it belonged to was trying not to make noise. That made it worse. If it had been a drunk neighbor or someone confused, they would have spoken by now. They would have knocked louder. This person didn't. I backed away from the bedroom door and locked it quietly. The click of the lock sounded too loud in my ears. I stood there in the dark, phone clenched in my hand, unsure of what to do next. Calling the police felt extreme, but so did pretending this wasn't happening. The doorknob to the apartment turned again. This time it didn't stop right away. It twisted slowly, deliberately, like the person was testing how far it would go. The deadbolt held. I heard a soft exhale on the other side, almost like frustration. My chest tightened. A faint scraping sound followed. Metal against metal. My mind immediately went to the lock. Someone was trying to force it. I moved farther into the bedroom, keeping my steps light. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want them to know exactly where I was. Another scrape, then a pause, then 3 quiet taps in a row.
Slow. Even.
Not random. It felt like a message. My phone vibrated in my hand when I unlocked it. No service issue. Full signal. No reason not to call for help. I hesitated anyway. I kept listening. The hallway light outside flickered through the bottom crack of my front door. A shadow passed across it. Someone was standing directly in front of my apartment now. Close enough that if they spoke, I would hear them clearly. They didn't say a word. I felt trapped. The only exit was the front door, and that was where he was. The bedroom window faced the parking lot, but I was on the second floor. Jumping wasn't an option. My bathroom was small and had no lock. There was nowhere to go. The handle jerked harder this time.
Once. Twice.
The door rattled in its frame. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid he could hear it. I pressed my back against the bedroom wall and slid down to the floor, trying to control my breathing. Then came the sound that made everything real. A low chuckle. Quiet, but unmistakable. He knew someone was inside. I finally opened the phone app and dialed 911, keeping the screen dark. As it rang, I heard a new sound. A light tap at my bedroom door. I froze. The tapping came again, slow and deliberate, like he was counting the seconds. Somehow, he knew exactly where I was. The tapping on my bedroom door stopped. For a moment, there was nothing.
No breathing.
No movement. Just silence. I stayed where I was on the floor, phone pressed against my ear, listening to the 911 operator asking questions I couldn't answer out loud. I whispered my address and told her someone was inside my apartment. Then the handle to my bedroom door turned.
Slowly.
I held my breath as the knob twisted back and forth, testing the lock the same way he tested the front door. When it didn't open, he stopped. I heard a faint shift of weight on the other side. He was standing right there. I could picture him clearly, even without seeing him. A sudden adar against the door made me flinch. He hit it with his shoulder, hard enough to shake the frame. The lock held, but I knew it wouldn't forever. I scrambled to my feet and backed into the corner near the window. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. The operator told me officers were on the way. She told me to stay quiet. I pressed my mouth shut and listened. Another hit. Harder this time. The door creaked. A thin crack appeared near the latch. I could see the wood splintering. I looked around desperately for something, anything, to defend myself. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from my nightstand and held it tight, knowing it wouldn't do much. The third hit forced the door partially open. Just enough for me to see him. He was a man, tall and thin, wearing dark clothes. His face was partially covered by a hood, but I could see his eyes. They were calm, focused. He didn't rush in. He just stood there, watching me. I screamed. That's when he lunged forward, pushing the door wider. I ran. I didn't think. I bolted past him, ducking under his arm, and sprinted down the hallway toward the front door. My feet slid on the carpet as I reached for the deadbolt. He grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back. I stumbled but didn't fall. I twisted away and swung the flashlight as hard as I could. It hit his arm. He grunted but didn't let go. The sound of sirens suddenly cut through the night. Distant but real. His grip loosened for just a second. It was enough. I wrenched free, unlocked the door, and threw it open. Cold air rushed in as I ran into the hallway, screaming for help. Doors down the hall opened. Lights flicked on. Someone shouted. I didn't look back. I ran until I reached the stairwell, collapsing against the wall as police rushed past me toward my apartment. My body was shaking uncontrollably. I could barely stand. I was alive, but I knew how close I had come to not being. I sat on the cold stairwell floor while the police searched my apartment. An officer wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and asked me to breathe slowly. I could still hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The hallway was filled with voices now. Neighbors whispering, radios crackling, boots moving back and forth. It felt unreal, like I had stepped outside my own life. After several minutes, one of the officers came back down the stairs. His expression was serious, but not rushed. He asked me a few more questions. What the man looked like, how long I thought he'd been inside, whether anything was missing. I told him everything I could remember, even small details that felt pointless at the time. Then he asked me something that didn't make sense. Are you sure you locked your door when you got home? I nodded immediately. I always locked it. I even double-checked the deadbolt out of habit. The officer didn't argue. He just nodded slowly and went back upstairs. About 20 minutes later, they let me back into the apartment. The front door was damaged. The lock was bent and the frame was cracked from the force. The bedroom door was worse. Splintered wood littered the floor. It looked like a place I didn't recognize anymore. That's when they showed me the closet. I hadn't used it in weeks. It was a narrow storage closet near the front door where I kept cleaning supplies and an old suitcase. One of the officers opened it carefully and stepped back. Inside, behind my vacuum, was a blanket folded on the floor. Next to it were empty water bottles and food wrappers. Someone had been living there. My stomach dropped as the reality set in. This wasn't a random break-in. This man hadn't just found my apartment that night. He had been inside before, possibly for days, maybe longer. The officer told me they believed he had entered through a loose maintenance access earlier that week. He likely watched my schedule, learned when I worked, learned when I slept. The thought made my skin crawl. Then came the worst part. They found a knife. It was tucked behind the water heater, wrapped in a cloth. Not a kitchen knife. Something heavier. Something intentional. The man was gone. He had slipped out during the chaos, likely when neighbors started opening their doors. No one saw him clearly. No security cameras caught his face. The police said it was rare, but not unheard of. People hiding in apartments. Waiting. Watching. As they spoke, I realized something that made my chest tighten. The breathing I had heard earlier wasn't from outside my apartment. It had been coming from inside. He wasn't trying to get in at 3 a.m. He was already there. I didn't stay in that apartment after that night. I packed a few bags and moved in with my parents the next day. The police told me they would keep looking, but they were honest with me. Cases like this don't always get solved. People disappear. Evidence dries up. Life moves on. They replaced the locks and repaired the door, but it didn't matter. The apartment no longer felt like a place where I could rest. Every corner felt watched. Every shadow felt occupied. Even in daylight, I couldn't stop imagining someone standing just out of sight, waiting quietly like he had before. Weeks passed. Then months. I returned to my routine, new job, new place, new locks. On the surface, everything went back to normal. But sleep didn't come easily anymore. I woke up several times each night, always checking the time on my phone. It was almost always around 3 a.m. I started noticing small things that shouldn't have mattered. A door not fully shut. A window lock that felt slightly loose. Footsteps in apartment hallways that seemed to stop outside my door. I told myself it was anxiety. That trauma changes how your brain works. I wanted to believe that. The police never found him.
No arrest.
No name. No record of anyone matching his description in the area. They told me that sometimes people like him move from place to place. Temporary spaces. Empty rooms. Shared buildings. That idea stayed with me. One night, months later, I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment when I found something that didn't belong to me. It was small. Easy to miss. A folded piece of cloth tucked behind a box I hadn't opened yet. The same kind of cloth the officer had shown me when they found the knife. I stared at it for a long time before throwing it away. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even know how to explain it. Now I triple-check every lock. I don't answer doors late at night. I don't ignore small sounds anymore. Sometimes when my apartment is completely quiet, I stop breathing just to listen. And every once in a while, I think I hear it again. Slow. Controlled. Breathing that doesn't belong to me. I don't know where he went. I don't know if he was ever caught. But I do know this. The worst part isn't knowing someone tried to hurt me. It's knowing how easily he blended into my life without being seen. And sometimes, when I wake up at exactly 3 a.m., I'm afraid that one day, I'll hear that quiet tapping again, from inside my own apartment. After that night, I developed habits I never had before. I memorized every sound my apartment made. The click of the heater, the hum of the refrigerator, the way the floor creaked when I shifted my weight. Anything unfamiliar stood out immediately. Silence itself became something I didn't trust. Friends told me I was overreacting. They said I was safe now, that the man was gone. But none of them had lived with the thought that someone had watched them sleep. Someone who knew their schedule better than they did. Someone who had learned how quiet they could be. I stopped leaving lights off at night. I slept with my bedroom door locked and a chair wedged under the handle, even though it made no sense. I checked my closets before bed. Every night. Even when I was exhausted. Even when I told myself it was pointless. The police eventually stopped calling. There were no updates. No leads.
No suspects.
The case was still open, but inactive. That word stuck with me. Inactive didn't mean finished. It just meant waiting. Sometimes I wondered if he had been watching me again from somewhere else. A different building. A different hallway. I started noticing people more. Men standing too still. Faces that lingered too long. Every stranger felt like a question I couldn't answer. One night, almost a year later, I woke suddenly from a deep sleep. My heart was racing before I even understood why. I checked my phone.
3:02 a.m.
The apartment was completely quiet. No traffic.
No voices.
No movement. Then I heard it. Not a knock. Not footsteps. A soft shift of weight. It came from somewhere inside the apartment. I stayed perfectly still, listening. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing followed. Eventually, my breathing slowed, and I convinced myself it was nothing. Just my mind replaying old fear. But when I got up the next morning, I found my hallway closet door open. Just a few inches. I know I closed it the night before. I always do. There was nothing missing. Nothing disturbed.
Just the door.
Open. I closed it and stood there for a long time, hands still on the knob. I didn't call anyone. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even check inside. I already knew what I would or wouldn't find. To this day, I don't know if he ever came back. I don't know if he ever truly left. What I do know is this. People think danger announces itself. They think it breaks windows or kicks in doors. But sometimes, danger is quiet. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes, the scariest moment isn't when you hear someone trying to get in. It's when you realize they might already be inside. Even now, I never check my door at 3 a.m. because I'm not sure what I'd see on the other side.